March 2, 1945, Western Germany, a damp fog clings to the low hills around a rural crossroad north of the Rhine. Frost still grips the grass. Water beads on armor plates, gathering in slow movement along cold steel seams. A Sherman tank waits with engine idling at a steady interval. 4 cycles, 1 breath. 4 cycles, another breath. The rhythm of timed explosions remains the only sign of motion in a field that has not yet decided to wait. Inside the hull, Private First Class William Bill Arden, 30, watches through a narrow visor slit. He studies the road ahead, a faint curve beneath the mist, while the rest of the world hides behind gray. Orders remain static. Hold position. Reconnaissance must confirm withdrawal of German forces. The rule is simple. The tank's strongest armor faces forward. The weak side must never meet a gun barrel. Every manual prints the same principle. Every instructor repeats it. Training turns it into instinct. Angle away from any suspected anti-tank threat. Never move toward the muzzle. Toward means mistake. Toward means the steel breaks. But Arden keeps seeing small details that authority cannot measure. The ditch to the left looks soft from the night's rain. The field to the right holds wheel ruts that disappear into open ground. A trap if the fog conceals distance. Ahead, the curve gives cover to anyone who knows how to wait. Silence settles over the machine. No voices, only the slow growl of forced air through the engine vents and the faint ticking of cooling metal. Then it arrives. A single metallic crack breaks the morning. Not thunder, not random debris. A shot from somewhere ahead. Distant, but exact. A first ranging round. It does not hit. It does not need to. The silence afterward is confirmation that someone is watching back. Arden keeps his eyes narrow, following where the sound might align with contours. The fog thins just enough to show a darker line against a hedge. Static creeps across the tank's internal radio. Words are there, but distance and weather fold them into noise. Platoon commander repeats the same directive. Hold. Trust the system. Trust the map. Trust the assumption that the enemy is falling away from the Rhine. Arden breathes once. The air inside feels mechanical, filtered. Lacking warmth, he shifts his boot on the pedal. One small movement. The kind that does not trip alarms. His hand rests on the control stick. The tank's turret stays forward, dutiful and blind. But Arden's thoughts tilt toward the threat instead of away from it, toward the barrel hidden in the fog, toward the source of the crack that broke the rule. Another pause, longer than expected. The ground waits. Arden considers the timing between rounds. The next one could arrive without warning. He pictures angles, distances, the seconds it takes for steel to cross open ground. Manuals cannot calculate a field softened by rain. In the quiet, instinct grows louder. Would you keep waiting, trusting a printed rule? Or would you turn the weight of steel into the danger? Before the danger finishes measuring you. Before the war, Bill Arden worked in a Detroit machine shop. He arrived before sunrise, punching the same dented time clock that marked thousands of precise mornings. Turbine housings sat under bright lamps while he calibrated each unit with measured pressure. His palms learned to read steel by feel alone. Heat told a story. Vibration revealed error. Balance decided whether a part would survive rotation or tear itself apart. Machines demanded respect, quiet, exact respect. That discipline made sense in a world where measurements were constant and consequences were predictable. He remembers the streetcar rides home, uniformed men talking about sports and shifts. His clothes always smelled of hot oil. On weekends, he helped neighbors fix tractors, tightening bolts in correct order. Stability came from following rules that never changed. Angles, torque, tolerance. A system protected the people who honored it. Bill kept his head down and worked. He believed reliability was a form of duty. Inside the Sherman, those habits returned. He tapped each switch twice before engaging, counted gear changes under his breath. He listened for any mismatch between track and engine tone. a sign of mud, misalignment, or stress. The others laughed, saying he thought more like the tank than a soldier. The loader joked that Bill could diagnose a loose bracket blindfolded. Arden never reacted. The machine was not a joke. Here, steel kept them alive. A missed detail had weight. The fog outside makes the hull feel smaller. The engine's idle thrum pushes through the floor. Arden rests his hand near the control handle and reviews everything he can control. Fuel pressure steady, coolant cycling, turret locks engaged. No problems, but the environment refuses to give reassurance. The field ahead offers no certainty. Doctrine assumes direction of threat. The manual gives comfort in print. Yet steel in the real world absorbs forces paper cannot consider. He thinks of his father's voice, an older man formed by the factories before the Great Depression. Metal survives by leaning into pressure, he had said. Running from force only gives it more to break. Arden never questioned that logic. Machines exist to push back. They hold lines. They do not retreat from a threat they can confront. A gust of damp air pushes a faint chill through gaps in the hatch. Arden adjusts his helmet, eyes still on the visor's narrow frame of visibility. The memory of Detroit lingers. Concrete floors, rows of equipment, everything arranged to reduce risk. War removes the guardrails. Here, the ground becomes enemy. Weather reshapes the rules. He feels a strain not in the engine, but in geometry. The Sherman's armor sits angled wrong for whatever waits at the curve. Exposed side. Vulnerable seam. Time stretches between radio messages. Authority insists patience saves lives. But authority does not feel the tremor of steel wanting to move. Arden checks the handle again. 1 millimeter of tension. A system can protect or delay. If you were responsible for the weight that carries 4 lives, would you keep trusting the rule or trust the steel beneath your hands? This platoon is not alone. It is one column in a planned advance stretching kilometers behind and ahead. Fuel trucks, spare parts, ammunition carriers, all depend on this road remaining open and efficient. Each delay sends consequences forward. Infantry at the riverbank rely on armor to secure the left flank before daylight strengthens enemy resolve. The system measures success in minutes saved, not shells fired. A crossroads like this becomes essential ground. If held, supply flows. If blocked, momentum freezes. A single disabled tank could turn timetable into immobility. Arden keeps that structure in mind. He knows the Sherman beneath him is more than a weapon. It is cargo, speed, and shield, scheduled to arrive at precise intervals. Officers miles behind use maps and radio bursts to track those arrivals. Fuel consumption is translated into time math. Distance becomes duration. Even the return of static on the radio introduces drift in the plan. Doctrine states that armor must push only in coordination, never acting alone. Unseen threats are to be bypassed, not challenged without certainty. Forward motion protects the clock. The tank's radio ticks again in its regulated pattern. Fuel level remains steady. Track tension unchanged. Turret rotation nominal. These details feed the system's confidence that this segment of steel can carry its weight across this sector. But Arden studies the environment with a machinist's suspicion. The damaged barn marking the turn is too intact on one side. Impact scars only face the road they now occupy. To the right, the ditch runs straight. Perfect alignment for an ambush crew trained to exploit routine. He calculates response time. 5 seconds to reverse from idle. 6 seconds more to pivot away enough to change the angle of exposure. 10 seconds to be hit if he keeps obeying procedure. Numbers in his head fall into place as clearly as turbine measurements once did. Doctrine expects tanks to favor the path of least vulnerability. German gunners expect that too. The system's advantage becomes a pattern the enemy can aim at. Another gust moves the fog. Moisture beads on the periscope glass. Arden feels the slight climb of engine temperature. Impatience warming steel. The loader shifts his weight. unaware of how his motion affects balance. Small things matter in confined machinery. Arden's fingers apply pressure to the control lever, stopping just short of movement. Waiting for certainty means waiting for a second shot. The hedge beyond the bend hides skill. A German crew lies there, well-trained, armed with mathematics of their own. They know distances, angles, and hesitation. They predict the moment when a Sherman will start to turn away. One shell timed correctly can remove not just one tank, but the schedule it was built to keep. The entire Allied advance depends on predictability. Predictability feeds the supply line, but predictability also feeds a gunner waiting for steel to follow the rulebook. Arden breathes once. Decisions affecting miles of men rest inside one fog-covered intersection. If the system demands stability, the wind shifts with a low sweep across the fields, pushing damp air westward. A faint scent rides the movement. Burnt cordite, sharp and chemical, too recent to belong to distant batteries. Arden lifts his chin slightly. His senses listen beyond instruction. Training taught him to trust machines. Experience taught him to trust absence more. Something unseen has already disturbed the air. Behind a farmhouse wrapped in fog, birds erupt upward in sudden unison. Their wings beat panic against the morning stillness. Not a gradual rise, a single synchronized flight. Arden follows their path with a narrow field of view through the periscope. The flock's starting point aligns with the curve ahead. A blind angle. A gunner's sanctuary. A second metallic crack arrives without warning, sharper and more precise than the first. Soil bursts upward near the roadside. Clumps flung like gravel thrown by invisible force. The energy feels directed now, not exploratory. The commander claims it is stray artillery overshooting from deeper lines. Procedure prefers that explanation, but the ground's reaction argues intention. Radio static intrudes on the comm inside the Sherman. A nearby platoon reports losing a tank only minutes ago. No visual contact, no discovered threat. Only destruction arriving from nowhere. The operator's voice wavers beneath the static, trying to sound controlled. Arden hears what the officers do not. Fear trimmed into professionalism. The fog holds subtle truths. One patch forms a gap too exact to be natural, like a curtain pulled aside just enough for aim. Arden finds a barn window missing its glass, yet the shards do not glitter below it. They were removed cleanly to create a field of fire. He notices a small puddle by the ditch. No breeze touches the surface, yet a ripple spreads outward, a vibration carried through earth. Machines communicate danger through tension. So does terrain. Inside the hull, the loader tries humor again. Something about Arden wanting to calculate geometry before breakfast. The joke falls into silence. Arden keeps his eyes forward. He presses his foot lightly on the gear pedal, feeling the engine's prepared response. The machine anticipates command. Steel wants movement. Another stretch of quiet descends. Too long to be peace. Every second without a sound suggests a German crew perfecting their correction. The hidden barrel takes measurements no one else respects. It has learned their angle. It has learned their obedience. The commander repeats the rule. Maintain formation. Angle away from any suspected gun. Doctrine demands turning vulnerability from threat. Arden knows the rule by heart. He knows the thickness of their side armor. He knows what a perfect hit does to it. Manuals cannot smell burning propellant. Moisture condenses on the periscope glass. Arden wipes a narrow arc, clearing a slit of vision. A faint glint pierces the gray, a reflection too straight for foliage. The moment vanishes as fog folds over it again. But the memory of shape remains precise in his mind. Metal hides behind leaves. His breathing slows. Calculations assemble in his head. Distance, trajectory, timing between shots. It is not instinct alone. It is pattern. The German gunner is ready, waiting for them to remain angled wrong, waiting for the next second of indecision. War often favors those who fire first. Ambush favors those who wait. Arden stares into a horizon that refuses to reveal itself. If a silent threat already holds aim on your breath, how long should you sit still and let it finish the math? The commander's voice arrives through the internal radio, steady and controlled. Maintain formation. Angle left. Do not expose the thinner front armor. Hold position until reconnaissance confirms the enemy has withdrawn. Doctrine repeats itself through static, firm in the belief that procedure protects life. Arden keeps his eyes forward, but his focus drifts to the numbers living beneath the steel. Side armor thickness is known. Deflection angles are proven. Every manual reinforces the same equation. Protection grows as the silhouette narrows. Turning away is designed to save the crew. But Arden's instincts challenge the calculation. Years spent reading the tremor of machines taught him when tension signals risk. Here, the ground dictates geometry. The ditch constrains retreat. The turn ahead forces exposure. If the next shell lands 10 inches deeper, a crewman dies before anyone names the threat. A direct side hit ends everything in half a second. A frontal hit, even if lethal, still gives the machine a chance to resist. Steel fighting steel. The rule assumes visibility, assumes breathing room, assumes the luxury of knowing direction. Fog removes those assumptions. The loader reloads his joke, lighthearted, unaware of how thin the line becomes between humor and silence. Arden does not respond. He listens to the engine pulse under his seat. Heat building, vibration shifting. Steel knows the approach of danger. A machine under threat carries a different rhythm. His palm hovers over the control lever. A tiny shift, and the Sherman will pivot right, toward the threat. Toward the muzzle that hunts them, orders insist the enemy is falling back. But the odor of cordite says a gun waits. The wind from the west says the barrel is ready. The stillness around the farmhouse says trained eyes stare into fog. Doctrine cannot smell the chemical trail of a recent discharge. Procedure cannot hear a puddle ripple from ground percussion. A rulebook cannot notice where silence becomes too perfect. Arden checks the periscope again. Still fog. Still nothing. Yet the next shot will arrive soon. The enemy has the easier task. Wait for the American tank to act predictably. Every second that passes reduces their options. The platoon sits angled away from danger because that is what the system expects. Protection by rule becomes vulnerability by routine. The commander repeats his instruction. Maintain the angle. Trust the doctrine. Trust distance. Arden hears the tone more than the words. A belief in stability shaped by maps and training, not by the texture of the field beneath them. Rules exist to prevent panic. But these rules were written far from this road, far from a hedgerow hiding a barrel aimed at predictable steel. Arden's hand grips the lever. His boot applies measured pressure to the pedal. Not enough to move, yet. The engine reacts anyway, its voice deepening. The machine asks for direction. He imagines his father's guidance. Metal survives by meeting pressure. Retreat feeds force. A barrel trained on your weakness wants you to obey instruction. The quiet voice in Arden's head tells him routine has become a trap. Another breath. Another calculation. The enemy gunner prepares to fire where the Sherman should be. Not where it could be if instinct overrules command. If waiting allows a hidden hand to choose the moment of destruction, who should decide when steel changes direction? The order on the radio? Or the man who feels the machine? Arden does not announce his decision. He does not ask permission. The lever moves under his grip, firm and final. The Sherman jerks hard to the right, treads biting into wet earth with a grinding roar that cuts through the morning fog. The machine swings against doctrine, pivoting toward the suspected barrel. The sudden motion throws the loader against the ammunition rack. The commander slams a hand against the hatch rim, shouting frustration and disbelief. Procedure has been broken in one violent, decisive turn. The tank's weight digs trenches into soft ground. Mud lifts and snaps beneath steel. The engine, surprised by the demand, responds with rising force. Compression, fuel, ignition, working without hesitation. The crew stares forward now, facing the unseen threat head-on. The very position every manual warns against. Thin protection behind them, strong armor in front. Arden breathes once, shallow and trained. The next blast arrives instantly. A metallic scream tears the air. The German shell reaches for the space where the Sherman should have been, where a rule-bound crew would still be sitting. But the turn denies it. Instead, it slams into the thick frontal armor, glancing away with sparks and ripped earth. The tank shudders, but structure holds. The ricochet's howl disappears into the fog, evidence of mathematics disrupted. Silence returns for half a second. Then adrenaline replaces it. Arden forces a slow acceleration, not enough to expose new ground. Just enough to ruin prediction. 5 meters of shift. 2 seconds of unpredictability. Enough for a gunner to lose certainty. The German crew now must recalculate. Angle lost. Timing broken. They hunted vulnerability and instead meet resistance. Inside, breath tightens. The commander tries to restore order, trying to pull protocol back into the machine. His voice pushes urgency. Identify target. Confirm direction. Request supporting fire. Arden does not stop listening. He simply prioritizes survival over procedure. Hands trained in Detroit tighten around the mechanism that steers survival. Caution has become calculated aggression. Moisture rolls down the visor glass. Fog thins just enough to reveal the suggestion of movement along the hedgerow. A shift in tone, not shape. A weapon prepares a second shot. Arden aligns the hull, giving the gunner a clean arc. The loader steadies ammunition, no longer joking. Another round blasts from the hidden emplacement. This one lands short, ground erupting in dark soil. They are no longer predictable. The enemy's advantage crumbles under 10 degrees of defiance. The Sherman continues forward, the machine expressing its weight with purpose. Treads crush wet grass, turret gears hum. Arden's choices pull the entire platoon into a new equation. They now face the threat rather than flee from it. The gunner whispers a direction, half seen, half sensed. The crew regains rhythm, not the one taught, the one necessary. Arden's mind remains mechanical. Torque, traction, leverage, steel against distance. He thinks like the tank. He thinks like the danger. The suppressed instinct that doctrine warned against becomes the variable that keeps them alive. In this moment, the war narrows to the space inside one pivot. The system demanded obedience. The ambush demanded deviation. Arden chose pressure over retreat. He chose to interrupt the enemy's certainty. The rule is broken. The machine continues forward. Section 7 moments pass without result. The hedgerow stays still. The fog closes in again, folding back over the damaged earth. Arden holds his position, neither advancing into the unknown nor reverting to the vulnerability he defied. The commander breathes hard through the radio line, but offers no reprimand now. The machine's stance has changed the battlefield's math. Nothing moves in the space where a second kill shot should have arrived. The platoon's gunners adjust elevation. Coaxial fire tests the angles ahead. Short bursts thudding into vegetation to disturb concealment. No return fire answers. The earlier certainty of danger turns into quiet confusion. Procedure pulls itself back together. Formation reforms. Radios resume rhythm. The tank next in line takes Arden's turn as its new orientation. Doctrine adapts under pressure whether it admits it or not. The steel vocabulary of the platoon shifts because one man refused silence. Arden's breathing slows. His hands remain steady on controls that moments earlier decided outcome. Minutes later, a separate channel interrupts routine. A distant unit, advancing along a parallel road, reports unexpected progress. An unseen kill zone once mapped for armored destruction now lies inactive. No losses taken, No ambush triggered. Their route holds clear, static crackles. Then confirmation. That road was meant for tanks like these. A prepared trap waiting for a column moving on schedule and by the printed rules. Something forced the unseen gunners to abandon their sequence. Something disrupted the timing that would have killed crews miles away. Inside the Sherman, no one comments. But the weight of implication settles over steel. Infantry finally sweeps the hedgerow that had threatened them. The search turns up the evidence. A German anti-tank cannon sits behind a mask of branches. Breach open. One shell jammed halfway into chamber. The crew fled their post, leaving tools scattered in mud. Tire marks lead west, escaping into deeper fields. No bodies, no firefight, just absence where lethal hands once worked. Officers on the ground record the find as malfunction. Reports upstream list it as inaccurate fire from a rushed position. Coincidence becomes the official explanation. Paperwork saves time by ignoring uncertainty. The platoon is told to press on. No mention of a turn made against instruction. No citation for judgment. Only a return to timetable. Arden accepts the quiet return to order. His gloves reset switches into standard configuration. He counts the gears aloud again, just loud enough for habit to acknowledge its own endurance. The engine temperature stabilizes through coolant lines that continue their duty. Mud begins to dry along the tracks. The machine remains functional. The crew remains breathing. Nothing appears changed. Yet everything has shifted by a single rotation of steel on wet soil. The radio clicks to life with new coordinates. The column advances, timing restored, mission unchanged. Only the tank's path through Earth marks where instinct challenged rule. Fog swallows that mark soon enough, leaving no trace for those who did not witness. The battlefield rarely announces what did not happen. It records explosions, not the choices that prevented them. Lives saved seldom register where statistics ignore absence. Arden leans forward, visor narrow, hands ready. In a war measured by supply lines and schedules, who tallies the disasters avoided because one driver refused to wait for permission? Section 8 by early afternoon, the platoon withdraws into a field lager screened by low hedges and supply vehicles. Engines wind down into clicking metal rhythms as heat bleeds from exhaust ports. Maintenance crews move in practiced paths, fuel cans lifted, track pins checked, grease pressed into joints that must endure another crossing. The war continues its schedule, indifferent to moments that altered its timing. The Sherman that broke formation takes its assigned resting space. Mud still clings to treads in thick slabs. The hull's underside drips water from the ditch it carved. A single scar curves along its frontal armor, a mark left by the shell that should have ended them. The crew looks at the mark, but says very little. Everyone understands its meaning. Officially, that meaning must remain unspoken. The commander summons Arden behind a line of parked trucks, where the noise is low enough for discipline to sound measured. His words come without anger. Initiative acknowledged. Protocol violated. Action noted as effective. Method recorded as unacceptable. The balance is exact. Praise withheld to preserve structure. Consequences softened to respect outcome. Performance and obedience remain separate columns to be evaluated independently. A report will document everything neutrally. Enemy fire misjudged range. Maneuver unplanned. The phrasing will protect the system from explaining why instinct succeeded where doctrine lacked variables. Arden does not argue. He stands as though hearing an equipment inspection, absorbing information, making no claim of credit. His uniform gathers dust along sleeves from where he steadied himself during the pivot. He brushes none of it away. Nearby, his crew begins quiet servicing. The loader runs a gloved hand over the impact groove, following the path where heat and momentum shaved steel. The gunner checks elevation gears, listening for any grind concealed by victory. The assistant driver tests hatch latches twice, adopting Arden's habits without announcing adoption. A survival shared becomes a lesson kept between men, not passed up the chain. A mechanic approaches with a paint stick, considering whether the scar should be sealed. Arden watches the decision. The mechanic leaves it for now. The mark stands as a thin reminder that the manual does not always predict which direction danger comes from. Convoys arrive from rear echelons. Fuel drums roll into rows. Crates of rations stack beside ammunition pallets. Radios chirp updates on new objectives. The machine of war continues because supply lines remain unbroken. No ledger will note the distance preserved by a forbidden turn. No staff officer will mark that schedule maintained owes itself to a single disobedient hand. The commander ends his reprimand with a final line. Procedure is what keeps soldiers alive. Arden simply nods. His thoughts return to a machine shop floor in Detroit, where ignoring the vibration in a bearing could destroy a turbine, even when gauges promised tolerance. Sometimes the tool knows before the technician. Sometimes steel warns before sight does. He walks back to the Sherman, climbs inside, and resumes the seat that holds the future of 4 lives. Checklists continue. Controls reset. Breath measured. Time obeyed. The next mission will treat him as another operator of another tank in another advance. Routine resumes its authority with silent expectation. No medal mentions the absence of explosions. No citation honors a convoy that never stalled. Quiet survival leaves no monument. Only those who witnessed remember. When instinct interrupts protocol and keeps the system moving, should history reward the rule that broke, or the man who bent it? The war does not pause for reflection. By nightfall, the map extends arrows farther east. Convoys load before daylight. Fuel trucks roll, their engines churning schedules into motion. Arden's platoon becomes one part of a larger advance. Metal pushing through land measured in logistical increments. None of those miles attached to his name. He remains a driver, designated by rank and roster. One man inside a vehicle registered only as weight and firepower. Reports from the day list, no exceptional actions. The near ambush is filed as miscalculated artillery. The hidden gun labeled abandoned under pressure from multiple threats. Procedure retakes the narrative with clean lines free of uncertainty. Staff officers log successful progress. Timetables regained. The mission acknowledges only visible effects. Intact tanks, open road, fuel consumption, matching expectation. Arden returns to the Sherman once maintenance concludes. The hull cools, metal contracting as heat gives way to darkness. The tank sits rigid, like a machine that understands purpose fulfilled. Its scar from the deflected shot remains unpainted for now, a thin memory in steel. Most will pass by without noticing, but Arden recognizes the trace of a trajectory that should have ended existence. Steel remembers pressure. Men do as well. The crew performs final checks with subdued concentration. The gunner runs sight alignment twice. The loader adjusts stowage straps with unusual care. Routine tasks hold extra meaning after the margin for error narrows to one decision. No words mark that shift. Silent acknowledgement replaces ceremony. Survival changes people without announcement. Elsewhere across the front, a different set of tanks drives forward unchallenged, occupying ground that might have become ruin had an unseen barrel kept firing. Their crews may never learn what they avoided. Their logs will record miles, not narrow escapes. Logistics victories rarely attract attention. They appear as schedules functioning correctly. The absence of disaster leaves no headline. Yet war's efficiency depends on exactly such absences. Quiet choices that prevent interruption shape outcomes more than dramatic clashes remembered in books. The industrial philosophy of this conflict, that movement and supply decide victory, relies on those who feel danger before doctrine updates policy. Systems take time to recognize patterns. Instinct responds immediately. Arden sits in the driver's position, visor dark, engine silent. He reviews the gear pattern in his mind. Hands rest on levers like they would in a workshop before dawn, trusting steel to communicate limits. He expects no commendation. The system does not reward deviation, even when deviation preserves the system. The night deepens. Radios crackle low traffic. Fuel tallies, route markers, weather forecasts. A generator hums behind the maintenance tents. Nearby, the Sherman's engine clicks its final cooling note. Calm returns to the field as preparation replaces tension. Tomorrow will demand the same precision. The rulebook will remain unchanged, but Arden will carry the knowledge that some pages require amendment when fog hides angles the authors did not consider. History records the armored divisions that crossed rivers and cities. It seldom mentions the drivers who decided which moment belonged to movement and which moment demanded defiance. Forgotten tank operators shaped outcomes one lever pull at a time. Quiet survival leaves a question behind. Would you have turned toward the shot?